Are you ready for the weekend yet? We have events, news, and a guest for you to enjoy this Lake Life weekend. Hey there, welcome to another episode of Lake Life Weekend Podcast. It's weekend 16 approaching, it's Easter weekend. I wish you a good time and hopefully you are able to spend it with your family. Harry and I are going to be at the lake with Oscar, and I promised Harry to do an Easter fire. In Germany, we traditionally have a Easter fire, an Easter weekend. I'm not sure, there's not a big tradition here for that, but we will do this weekend. And I also know that at Spanky's there's an Easter brunch on Sunday, and I spoke to Josh actually last week, and he said there's still room available. So if you don't know where to go yet, I can recommend to spend Easter Sunday at a brunch at Spanky's. And stay tuned for an interview with Chris Hawley, architect from Fargo. We recorded this interview at our last EXPO in March. And if you don't know Chris Hawley's work, you may have experienced it in Lakes Country, going to the Brew or Briggs or Hub 41. He also designed many residences on various lakes. He will speak about his own lake life and his little cabin that he has built in Lakes Country. And another prestigious project that he is involved and he designed is the governor's residence in Bismarck, North Dakota. That does not happen to many architects, that they are able to design a governor's residence. So you can see Chris Hawley is very successful, a young gentleman. He's my age. He has a small firm. Actually, I don't know that is that small anymore. I think he has probably 10 architects employed or even more. I don't know. I have been there. I met him before. I know him. We're befriended, and he came to our expo to speak about lake life, and I'm very happy to share this interview with you. So lean back with a cup of coffee or tea this weekend if you find the time, and enjoy Chris Hawley talk about lake life. And if you want to know what's happening in the area, go to lakelifeweekend.com. You will find our daily updated event schedule with everything fun to do, from Park Rapids to Alexandria, Detroit Lakes, Perham, everywhere in Lakes Country. Thank you very much for tuning in, and feel free to email us to hello@lakelifeweekend.com with any recommendations or suggestions. We appreciate that. You have a wonderful Easter weekend. Thank you for tuning in. Welcome to the Lake Life Expo today, Saturday, and we have another program on stage. It's with those stars, they are always late. No, we have Chris Hawley here with us today, very actually famous architect from the local area, from North Dakota, and we will speak to him about architecture, his background, where he's from, what he's doing, what he has been doing, and I was hoping to speak a little bit about the topic. 1 second, is that better? Cabin or camper is a theme that I think is interesting to everybody. Do I start small? How do I get access to a lake eventually? How can I grow it? And as I know Chris, he likes smaller properties as well. His lake home is a fairly small one, and I was hoping to speak a little bit about any various cabin styles one can have, maybe the history of smaller lake cabins and all those things. I don't want to curate that talk too much, and I like him to speak as much as possible. Sure. Thank you for coming. You gotta hold this very tight to you.
Thing on?
Yeah, it is on. Yeah.
Okay.
And then maybe you can introduce yourself a little bit first, and then I keep asking questions. Thank you.
Sounds good. All right. So I'm Chris Hawley with Chris Hawley Architects. I'm a local guy. I'm actually from Minot originally. I have a firm here in town. We do projects all over North Dakota, Minnesota. I'd say our focus, I shouldn't say focus, but a lot of our work is lake cabins, lake homes, estate projects that are kind of legacy builds for families. I'm a lake kid. I grew up on Lake Metagoshi, which is like North Dakota's one Minnesota lake, on the border of Canada and North Dakota, and just like this really special place. So, I grew up, my parents used to load the car at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Friday, and we'd go to the lake and live there for the weekend. And so that's pretty ingrained in who I am. And, fast forward 20 some years later, and I still can't get it out of my blood. And so, have my own little cabin now, and love to go to a different lake now. It's not Lake Metagoshi, it's West McDonald, but we do. I think the part that's kind of fun about our firm is that we do anything from a 550 square foot cabin, which is what my cabin is, to a 5,000 and 500 square foot cabin, which is for other people that's their normal, and probably even bigger than that at times. But I like to understand what that means at all scales, and I think whether you're a small family with a little cabin or wants a little cabin, or you're a multi-generational family that wants to experience that all under one roof, is kind of interesting to me. That's a cool design problem.
When you visit with clients that want to be on the lake, I guess it's positioning. How is it? How do they approach? What's your experience? How do they get connected to the water, to the surroundings? Building a permanent structure is something long lasting. So how is that approached? Sunlight, trees, level.
All of those things.
Yeah, in one sentence.
Yeah, it's all of those things.
Yeah, okay. But just what do they most desire, or like what is to consider, just for a lay person,
anytime you meet with a client initially, you're talking about their goals, kind of the programming needs, and that programming discussion is about space requirements. It's about relationships from one room to a next. It's about orientation relative to your neighbor, orientation relative to the sun, orientation relative to the waterfront. All of those things are a part of it. To me, you're always you can build a house anywhere, but when you build a house on a lake, or relative to that's a unique circumstance. And so the orientation of rooms relative to that amenity, to me, is really the unique part about doing a lake project, versus doing another house in town. If it's a house in town, to me, it's it's not as inspiring, or it's not as engaging as it should be. And really, I think embracing the waterfront, whether it's folding wall systems that open up so you feel like you're sitting outside next to the water, whether it's waking up in the morning and feeling like you're connected to the water immediately, or sleeping with the windows open so you can hear the waves lap at the beach. Those things are all part of that discussion. It's sort of an experience thing. Cool thing about the lake is that people will certainly go outside of the standard box in terms of how they think about their project. So, I would say it's way more creative. It's way more design heavy when you go to the lake, because they're not trying to do the same thing as their neighbor on a 90-foot lot like they would in town. It's not about it's actually creating a different experience than, being in a house in South Fargo or whatever. It's a different experience for sure.
Yeah, urban and then being in rural, I guess, a very connected to the outdoors more than ever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And does that also, the romantic picture of a Minnesota cabin, do you know like what is the history? Like it started, maybe there was a couple cabins in the 40s, but more in the 60s, people got out. And how did that develop? Being connected to the outdoors, it's a weekend escape. I mean, the desire from owning a lake home was always to rejuvenate, right? Actually be exposed and connected to the elements more than ever. Does that do you use materials, or like can that be converted into the structure too? How is that happening maybe?
Well, I think it's interesting, and you think about the evolution of having a lake cabin in this part of the world. You know, my grandma would move to the lake in April and not move back to town until October, you know, and
really?
And my dad lived at the lake like every summer. Like they never came back to Minot. They were an hour and a half away and never came back. That's a different animal. That, you know, the nature of this world is that people don't do that very often anymore, or don't have the ability to do that, because most people it's kind of a double income family, and you know both people are working, and so that's tricky. So I think it's evolved a lot into, you know, weekends or long weekends, or maybe a week or here in the summer and some of that. So I think that sort of long-term stay component is unique, and that's a luxury, I think, for certain folks that have the ability to do that, but not everybody gets to do that. Like that's, I think I see a lot of limited use or limited time at cabins or at a lake home. And so they become more and more of, I think the new culture is that like it's just a weekend thing. Or you're seeing a lot of that.
With your current or recent, let's just say the last 5 years, and maybe that's what you know it's coming, has there been a shift? Are your customers, or do you see newly built, they approach it differently? Are they going down in size? Is there a trend in a different build nowadays?
I think it, you know, obviously depends on, you know, we've done some monster homes that are for 4 generations where, you know, my great grandma has to have a guest bedroom on the main floor so that she can experience the lake. Grandma and grandpa have their own suite. The husband and wife have their own suite, and then all the grandkids have their own bedrooms. And that's a I call those legacy projects in terms of multi-generational things. That's one thing. I've got a lot of projects in my office that are, you know, husband and wife with the means to do whatever they want, and they want family to come visit, but it's just their house. And those are probably medium-sized projects and kind of about celebrating the lake with their friends and family on a limited basis, but in general, it's just a single family. And then, you know, there's my attitude, which is, you know, I'm married, I have 2 kids. My 2 kids love to play soccer and are in activities, and a lake idea is a really hard thing. And so, you know, I might get to my cabin 10 weekends a year or 8 weekends a year, and I hope that they're the best 8 to 10 weekends of the year, but I don't really like the idea of a huge investment. And so, you know, my approach was thinking about my cabin as a glorified, you know, it's an RV connected to the ground, or you could, you know, or it's like a hotel room. You know, it's a place to crash at the end of the day. It's really, for us, it's about being on the water. It's about, you know, being on a paddleboard. It's about riding my bike. It's about going for a run outside. It's about all, you know, collecting turtles, you know, whatever it is. If you're inside at the lake, to me, you're not really, you can do that in town.
A very minimalistic approach.
Totally. You should be outside.
That's where.
Well, and I actually think that during these periods of the year, you should, even when you're inside, you should feel like you're outside. And that's an important, I don't know, I think that I kind of put that, that's high on my list. And when we start to do a new project for somebody, like you should be able to not have to run the air conditioning, you know, on a beautiful day.
Okay, now we are talking to the air conditioning country. I don't like, I never have air conditioning, but I also have a lot of trees. So how do we get that done? By putting it?
Yeah, I mean, it's about window choices. It's about door choices. It's about cross ventilation. It's about shading. It's about orientation of facade. It's all of those things.
So we can manipulate the elements with the right architecture to create a cooler environment.
Absolutely. I mean, my little cabin it's a house and it has air conditioning. I bet you we run the air conditioning twice a summer, and it's only on that really gross night where the humidity is really just ridiculous. But in general, if you can manage it with cross ventilation, rarely do you need to have air conditioning on.
The breeze cross, that means one window on the east
One
side, one on the
a
west
window
side
on each
open.
side, and they're operable, and you have the ability to manage that manually.
We call that Stoßlüften in Germany. There's even a word for that.
That's awesome. We don't have that word.
We cannot no.
I'm gonna steal that.
Stoßlüften. Yeah, I write that down later. But
Yeah.
yes, I am.
It won't sound the same though when I say it.
No, but I'm glad to hear that, and that's the advantage of actually getting somebody involved with a design thinking, or like not just we're not just putting up a square box and call it a house, but with the right technical elements or design decisions, we can create an it's also environmental green. I mean,
Absolutely.
we don't want to create electricity usage unnecessarily if we can use a breeze to cool down. And actually, that's the cabin of the 60s. They made it through the weekend comfortably. There was sometimes they didn't have electricity, and they enjoyed 3 months. I don't know, but
Yeah, now when we build them, we just try to make them mouse-proof.
mouse-proof, right?
Because the 50s ones are not. Which is the reason why I tore down the one that was on my property before we built ours. But that's a separate conversation.
Yeah. But you mentioned also when you're inside, you want to feel as if you're outside, and you create that with floor-to-bottom window spaces. Explain that. Like, how can I create an environment which is like a structure?
Yeah. My little cabin, I always refer back to it because it's a reflection of kind of the way I think about stuff, and the way that, I mean, it's a budget-driven project. It was $150,000 cabin, but
newly built.
What's that?
Newly built.
Brand new build. Lot was not that. Lot was more. But just in terms of approach, it has everything that a house has. I mean, in terms, it's very nicely finished. It's got, it's in my mind, it's very luxurious. It's not big, but it's very luxurious, and I think it comes down to deciding what's important to you. And for me, it was, I would have loved to have done a lift and slide glass wall system for $60,000. Well, that doesn't make a lot of economic sense. That's a different stratosphere in terms of budget. For me, it was like, hey, how about it, we have a rhythm of patio doors that go across the front of this house that all open up, and for $12,000, you've got kind of the same effect and feeling where you feel like you're outside. The cabin turns into a screen porch. Is kind of my attitude. Like, you want to feel like you're in a porch all day, especially on a beautiful day. That's why you're there, is to embrace the fact that we only have 3 months of this stuff, or 4 months of this stuff, or whatever it is. And then, what's adjacent to that, I think, is kind of interesting. Even though my cabin is only 20 by 28, I have a 10 by 20 deck space that's immediately adjacent. So, and what's funny about my little cabin, which is 560 square feet, is that we sleep 12 people on a weekend, because every room is a bunk room, and the boathouse is not just storage for wakeboards and skis, and it's got a queen size bed, and it's kind of like a honeymoon suite. And when you have that many people at a lake cabin, we're not hanging out inside. We might have some people prepping dinner. We might have some people sitting at the table visiting, but then that deck becomes an extension of the living space. So essentially, if you think about it right, I've got a 30 by 30 outdoor room that is awesome when the sun is out and you can kind of soak in the sun, but you know, for those that want to get out of the sun and be in the shade, they can kind of hang out in portions of the cabin. So it's, in my mind, it's about making that space, or that 560 square feet, live like it's actually 2,000 square feet. And there's a trick to that. You know,
Yeah.
It's about selections, it's about thoughtfulness, it's about design decisions. It's all in there.
It's all in there. And I think there's pictures. I failed to have a slideshow, but you have pictures available on your website.
We
I
do.
know it's a beautiful. I haven't been there yet, but I want to see it.
I want to see it too again.
Hopefully thought out by now.
Yeah.
But
It is.
It is. But maybe someone has a question for Chris in the audience. If you want, you can also meet him later and talk to him at his booth over there. Yeah, I like that minimalistic approach. I know that 560 square feet can be a lot of space. In Europe, we have very small apartments at times. My first apartment was 460 square feet and was plenty. Didn't host 12 people though. But
Right.
yeah, no, I love the perspective of having the outdoors meet inside, and it's very relevant to choose location. Stoßlüften is a word that I will pass on to you. Thank you very much for sharing your design approach and your intel. And yeah,
You bet.
people can meet with Chris here later. Thank you for coming.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, this was already our newest episode of the Lake Life Weekend podcast. We sure hope you enjoyed it. Tune in again next week with another great guest and updates. Always check out our website, lakelifeweekend.com, and if you have some comments, please feel free to email us at hello@lakelifeweekend.com, and you have a wonderful weekend ahead.